Street photography can be hard, but I have one method that will help you. Hi, it's Peter here, and let's get right into the business. 7 tips on how to use reflections on your photography coming up. Reflections can be found everywhere, especially in the cities. You got windows, you got shiny walls, like rock walls. Some of them are really shiny. Then you got puddles after rain. Unfortunately, when I was photographing and making these images for this video, it did not rain, so some of the rain shots are from our archives. Sorry about that. Can't control the weather, unfortunately. And wherever cars, shiny metal things, traffic mirrors, and all those things can act as your reflecting surface. And the first thing is to look for different type of angles. If you're photographing straight on to a reflecting material, like let's say like a window in a city, you will be in the photograph. Sometimes that can be a thing if you can position yourself in a place where it actually adds something to the story in the reflection. So bear that in mind. So sometimes the choice of clothes can be a decisive thing. Going a little bit to the side, you can really change the scenery that you see, and from the same spot, just a slight movement might make the image totally different. And go to both sides and look around, and don't rush into the reflective or the images where you use reflections. Try to take your time and see what would happen, and make the composition ready, and use the fishing technique. That's one way to do it. Of course, if you're more of a reactive or like to react to things that happens, then do that. But this reflecting thing on windows, for example, is very good for fishing technique. And also on this one, like in every photographic genre, using diagonal lines is usually a good thing. So if you're on a side of a window, shopping window for example, or a store window, just get that diagonal lines and that perspective thing going on, so that you can get some interesting images. And then one important thing is, of course, play with light. I don't think you can make a photographic content video without talking about the light, because light is the most important thing in a photograph. With interesting light, you can make a dull scene look interesting, but an interesting scene without any good light might be really dull. So light is everything. And especially when you're photographing reflections, you need some shadow play and light play. You need those bright spots and you need those dark spots, because if there are no real shadows, the reflections might not be that interesting. But play around and try, and again, move a camera slightly, you might get a nice shadow, a darker area. And especially nighttime is a very good time to photograph reflections, because or late at night when it's dark, the reflections from store windows are more defined. They're stronger, because in bright conditions, as I said, it's not that strong. Great symmetry. Symmetry is a strong way of making the composition. You can make a kind of like a double image of someone. You just go very close to the window and place the camera as close as possible, and then wait for something to happen, and you will get this nice mirror effect. And maybe there's a car or someone walking or whatever. You really can get some funky images. And the better the reflection, the stronger the reflection is, the more absurd and abstract the image might be. So go close to the windows or some other reflective surface, but usually windows are the best mirrors on when doing this type of symmetry. And you can break the symmetry by not having the edge of the window in the middle of the frame. You can play around with that and see how that goes. Wait for something to happen. And again, good for fishing technique. I like symmetrical compositions. What about you? Is that something that you like, or you prefer the traditional way? Because some people say that symmetry is not a proper way to make the composition, but I tend to like it quite a bit. I think it's a pleasing and a good way of making a composition. Try symmetry. It's an effective way to make the composition. But please tell us in the comments down below, what are your thoughts about symmetry? And then number 4, include a human element. A street photograph usually is a photograph of a person of some sort. Not the person, but the image. You might have a close-up of a face, or you might have someone walking into the scene and filling a, let's say, the bright spot, which is a bit of a cliche. But as I said many times, cliches are something that are cliches because they usually work and make a pretty good image. But of course, it's not always enough. So do something else, try new things. If you always do that type of thing, then, try something else. I tend to like these type of images, even though, as I said, they're cliches and we should try something else. But that's a good way to have an anchor in the image. We usually see that person if it's in the brighter area of the image, we see it first, and it usually adds to the image. And there's also one good thing about the reflections is that usually the people don't realize that you're photographing them, or they realize it less. They just might look at you and see what on earth are you doing. They don't realize that you're photographing a reflection of them, because they just don't. Most of them don't understand that, and that's a good way to photograph people, through reflections, if you find intimidating to photograph people in the public. So this is a good way to start. And also one good thing to add human elements are silhouettes. Sometimes the light is in the back and the person is in the shadow, so adding a silhouette is a good way of having a person in the image. And that's also a good way, because then the humans are not recognizable, and there is no problem with rights of using the image if you feel intimidated of using photos of strangers on the streets. That's also a good way, and it could be a style to find these silhouettes in different places and different types of silhouettes of people, and reflections are really good for that too. Before we get into the next one, a few words about the gear. I used XS20, the Fuji XS20 on this particular video, and I had two different 27mm that I used. I used the Fuji XF27 f/2.8, and then I had the TD Artisan 27mm f/2.8 lens, which are both mine. The TD Artisan was sent to me, so a disclaimer, everything I say about the lens is all my own opinion, and I've marked the images so that you know which one it was used, which lens was used. And I also had my Ricoh GR3X with me, so two different cameras and 3 different lenses that I used. And 2 things I need to say before we continue. I forgot to say them earlier. Learn how to use manual focus, because when you have text like that on a window, it's a lot better to use manual focus so that the autofocus won't grab the text. And then another thing is that a wide-angle lens should have been a better choice for this particular photo shoot. It would be easier to get those shots with the reflections. And then number 5, have movement in the reflections. Because the image is a bit messy or quite busy, usually when you're taking an image of a reflection from, let's say, like a store window. There's a lot of things going on. There might be double reflections. Some part might be seeing through to, if you're in a corner, you might see through to the street in the front corner, and then you have reflections for 2 different directions and all that kind of stuff. Well, you can't have 2 directions, but you know what I mean. You see through the corner of the window, or the street corner, and then you have the reflection from the window. And then you have some stuff inside that also might be a reflecting surface. So you might have several different reflections. And adding a movement can make a really impressionistic image, which is usually quite pleasing. It depends on, of course, on your style. If you want tack sharp, then this might not be your thing. But I kind of like that there is some mystery and you don't reveal everything. And there's a lot to look at the images, and reflections has made me to do more busy images, and I kind of like them. There is something new, at least for me. I don't know, maybe not you. I don't know how much you photograph reflections and use them. Please let us know in the comments down below. And then layer the reflections for depth. Layers in a photograph, that you have a foreground, midground, and a background, gives an image kind of like a 3D vibe, and it's more interesting to an image if it has layers. There is more for the eye to wander around and look at the image, and of course the layers can also frame the subject in a way that you have some soft, unsharp or out of focus areas in the front and in the back maybe, and then you have something in the middle which is your subject, and that's really effective way of making the image, and reflections are really good for the layers. You might have the edges of the window, you might have the thing in the middle of the window, you might have something. I already talked about the photographing in corners. You might have something in the behind the window, or you might photograph inside a store and you might have something there that is either reflective or something going on there, and combining all these things you can get really compelling and interesting images. And a reminder, after the 7th tip I will have an extra tip. Focus on color and contrast. Of course you can make black and white images using or using reflections, but I think colors are something that adds to these type of images quite a bit. And of course contrast is something that you really need. If there is no contrast, I think the image is quite dull when you photograph in reflections. That can give you really interesting images, and adding saturation and vibrance to the colors can give you an interesting image too. But of course, if your style is more subtle, then try to find your way of using and taking advantage of different colors in an image when you're using reflections as your kind of method. The extra tip. Embrace imperfections. I was talking about busy images, like I think I mentioned it the 3rd time. In my opinion, they are not like perfect images, and there might be some surprise elements in the image, but embrace those. Because usually if you make a totally perfect image, it's usually very boring. You need to have some distracting elements in an image in order it to be interesting. That's my opinion. I don't know, what do you think? You like perfect images, or do you like images where there's something slightly off that makes the image interesting? It starts bothering you. I prefer images like that. But it's really hard to explain what that distracting element is that is a good one, because it might be a distracting element which might take the kind of like the attention of the actual subject of the image, or whatever the subject is. Is it the person, or is it just a scene that tells something as a whole scene? And here are some more videos about street photographs, about the approach, how to approach street photographs with different ways. But hey, thanks for watching, and bye for now.